Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We've got a lot to discuss in the world of Palantir today. On the docket today, we got to talk about price action, NHS updates, and then the link between Palantir and Israel. Now on price action, obviously the stock is red. A lot of stocks are red, and we've got to break down why the stock market is red, why your portfolio is red, and why Palantir is down. So we're going to talk about that. Number two, NHS updates. The Economist just did an article today about why the NHS needs the federated data platform and potentially why Palantir could also be the runner-up to get that deal. So we'll be discussing that and my thoughts on if we could get that deal announcement on earnings November 2nd. And then finally, we're going to discuss a little bit more deeper around the link between Palantir and Israel. As I've been doing more research, I'll have more research in the coming weeks. But today we're going to start the process of trying to understand what really is the relationship between Palantir and Israel, and is there actually a chance for Palantir to be working with them more in depth? Are they already working with them and we just don't know about it in the context of what's going on with Israel and the Hamas terror attacks? Let's get into it. All right, first thing for the day. Price action. Palantir right now after hours down 1% after being down 0.81% during the trading hours, $16.89. I think we got to a high of like 17.40 today. Yeah, 17.44 around that range. And now we're down below $17 at 16.88. Palantir is not the only company that is down. SoFi is down 761. Tesla took a nasty beating today, down 10%, $217. Enphase is down 15% after hours. This is a very popular stock around the YouTube, Twitter community. This company is $98. It is finally below $100. It's down 15% after hours after being down 6% during the day. And then the S&P 500 is at 425. The S&P 500 was about 435 in the morning, and now it's at 425. Why is this happening? Number one reason, and this is actually hitting a new high as I'm recording this right now, is the thing we talked about yesterday, if you remember, which is this good old 10-year treasury. You know, when I was 10 years old, which was 2007, we were just about to have one of the greatest financial collapses we've had since the Great Depression, and I wasn't really worrying about that. You know, I was just worried about what ice cream I was going to eat. Now, when I think of the 10-year, the concept of 10 years, I think of this treasury that is basically at 5%. What you're looking at right now is the yield you can get on a US 10-year treasury at 4.99%. Let's call it 5%, which is really harming stocks. Again, we talked about it yesterday, but if you can get 5% risk-free from the US government for helping to finance the US debt, then why would you take a risk and put your money into the stock market? I mean, if you put $100,000 into a stock in January, that $100,000 could be $80,000, $90,000, maybe $94,000 right now. If you put it into the US 10-year treasury, you could have potentially made $105,000, which is just insane. The idea that you can actually get a 5% return on your money for not having to take that much of a risk. The higher that yield gets, the harder it is for equities to do well. Also today, Jerome Powell spoke. Now, Jerome Powell said he liked that inflation came down over the summer, and then it came down pretty meaningfully over the summer, and he sounded kind of dovish in terms of the fact that he doesn't really think rates have to be that much higher given how much inflation came down. But he also started talking about how the consumer is pretty strong. And if the consumer is strong and the consumer continues to spend, we got job reports today. We had 21,000 less jobless claims than were expected. So about 198,000 people submitted a claim to the US government that they don't have a job, which is 21,000 less than we expected, which means more people still have a job, which means they have more money to spend, they have more money to put into the economy, which means the consumer is being resilient, surprisingly resilient. And right now, Palantir is not going to benefit if inflation does not come down and eventually interest rates come down. And the one thing stopping inflation from coming down is the consumer being resilient. So though Jerome Powell sounded kind of, you know, dovish today, he sounded nice about where the stock market is and where inflation is. And the market kind of ticked up a little bit around 1 p.m. and then immediately decided to collapse after the market really factored in what he had to say. And as a result of that, you get some Palantir price action at $16.88. Look, the big thing to me is that Palantir, even at $16.90, $17, whatever it is being very strong in this range. Remember, it was at $15.40 just 2 weeks ago, and it broke out of that $15 range, and it stayed stuck to 16, and really surprisingly did a good job being from $16.80 to 17. So we'll see tomorrow if we see a further collapse, if that US 10-year finally officially goes above 5%, because then I do think the market's just going to have a hard time being able to keep up. Or if people feel like it's oversold and they want to participate in the dip, well, you will see what happens. But when a company like Tesla falls 10% in a day, when a company like Enphase, that is a very popular retail heavy stock, goes down, you had people selling their entire Tesla positions today. If you're following around what's going on Twitter, I mean, it was a rough day in the stock market, and I'm sure everyone had a little bit of a red day. The question is now, does the red continue or does it not? And we will see in the future what ends up happening. Okay, now before we move on, one quick thing I have to address from yesterday. Made a little bit of a mistake. Allen Industries, the company that I told you was using Palantir, I went to allenindustries.com and it's actually AllenIndustries.net. So this is a data analytics company. This seems like much more likely of a partnership that Palantir was able to do. We democratize access to AI-powered data analytics, equipping you with unparalleled capabilities to unify, analyze, and act on your data. And they particularly work in the agriculture, agribusiness, manufacturing, industrial industries. This is not a professional janitor cleaning company, which is what I pulled up yesterday. Silly mistake by me. .com versus .net got me. I found out today, and I was like, oh, that's not the company using Palantir. But what I talked about yesterday, I still think can be used as a thought project in terms of if a company that does professional cleaning services was to use a service like Palantir, what would that look like? And that was kind of the gist of the discussion yesterday. And, it's not really quite far out of the possibility that a company like Allen Industries, the janitor company, not the executive data decision-making company, that's the actual Allen Industries, could use Palantir. And the reason for that is because you got companies like Miller's Ale House using Palantir, which is just a restaurant brand. And I know there's so many different ways restaurants could be able to leverage something like Palantir's Foundry AIP, but so could companies like a cleaning service that compile massive amounts of data, especially at the scale that these guys are at, and then have to deploy that data. At the end of the day, I think of Palantir as a tool to understand your data, no matter what business you are, whether you're a media company, a supply chain company, a company that's doing logistics, a company that's doing financial services, energy company, you're using data. And that is my bull case for Palantir. It's a question of if they can execute, but my bull case is I believe their software can be used everywhere. So if they can be used everywhere, then I would imagine a company like Allen Industries that does cleaning could also be using Palantir. So AllenIndustries.net, that is the actual company. You can check out their own website if you want to see what they do, but I'm assuming they partner with Palantir particularly for the fact that agriculture, agribusiness, manufacturing, and industrials is something Palantir is not as big in. I mean, I haven't seen many PRs around agriculture and agribusiness in the intersection of Palantir and what they are doing. So I'm assuming Palantir was like, hey, if this company is already in this industry, we could assist them by, licensing Foundry, AIP, helping them, creating joint solutions together. They've done many partnerships like that in the past. And then having another way to just have customer acquisition or penetrate different industries. It'll be interesting to see if Palantir ever goes into the SMBs to the point where they get to a business like Allen Industries, which is the cleaning company, which is probably not making as much money per se as AllenIndustries.net. And if they can come up with a tailored product for those small businesses that may not even be that small to the average person, there might be a massive opportunity for them to expand and offer some type of commoditized version of Foundry or AIP for any business to be able to use. All right, moving on to our next topic. The Economist put out this article today. Britain's NHS is trying once again to collate patients' data. The project is imperfect and controversial, but the technology is needed. The reason I wanted to cover this is because it was really interesting to see another news source basically talk about the NHS that's not from the UK, get a bit of a different perspective on how they conceptualize what's going on in the NHS and why a product like Palantir could potentially be needed, and sort of how Palantir could ultimately benefit the NHS, again, even if they think Palantir is a little bit of a spy company. So here's the summary of that article, and then I want to talk about what it means in the context of Palantir. Number one, they talk about inefficiencies in the NHS include IT systems that cannot communicate with each other. They're not interoperable, leading to patients repeatedly providing their medical histories and emptying operating rooms despite a lot of high demand. It says that the FDP, the Federated Data Platform, aims to address these inefficiencies by integrating healthcare data across the entire NHS. Again, that really is the bull case for what the FDP can do, and that just sounds like Palantir. Similar projects have shown positive results, including quicker cancer diagnosis and reduced hospital stays through data integration. That's also Palantir at the Chelsea and Westminster Trusts that showed a 28% reduction in backlogs and wait times, which is really important. And then they said that concerns include poor communication about the FDP's objective. And that was kind of the core point of the article, speaking that privacy issues related to Palantir's involvement and the potential of the project to become obsolete over its 7-year duration is one of the larger concerns. Now, the interesting thing here is that the article agrees that improving data integration is crucial for the efficiency of the NHS to even be valuable, for even, to offer some type of significance to the citizens of the UK. But what they're critiquing is the poor communication about the FDP's objectives. And I kind of don't disagree with them here. I mean, look, the narrative around Palantir being this evil company is out there. It exists. Then on top of that, you're working on this secret new project called the FDP, the Federated Data Platform. No one even knows what it means. And this is why in October 1st or September 29th, the NHS announced that they were going to decide to do the decision in mid-October. We're now in mid-October, so hopefully we get an answer. But on top of that, they were committing £2 million to a basically advertising campaign to educate users on how Palantir or how the FDP would be used for their data, which to me was, a pretty easy way to understand. Oh, you're going to use Palantir, right? Like you want to educate people because you know that Palantir software is coming in, and if Palantir software is coming in, you want people to be like at ease and voluntarily give up their data, because if they don't give up their data, then that's obviously not going to be good for anybody. So I think that advertising campaign will go in tandem with the announcement of a Palantir, hopefully soon. And on top of that, I started asking myself, all right, so we're seeing articles from different news sources come out, talk about this NHS deal, talk about when it's coming out. When are we actually going to get it? And then I realized, what if they announce it on November 2nd, on earnings day? What if the reason Palantir is holding earnings in the morning is because the NHS will announce the announcement in the morning? I give it a low probability because they said mid-October, so I'm assuming mid-October. Now, they could be lying and they could be bureaucratic as a government that always says one thing and does the other, so maybe that's going to happen. But I then remembered there have been plenty of examples of companies releasing a crap ton of earnings on the day where PRs on the day when they release their earnings. One example that people may not know about is Rumble, which is a competing video platform to like YouTube and Twitter and all that stuff. Rumble announced like 5 different acquisitions they made on their last Q2 earnings call. And you would just see press release, earnings. And usually it's to kind of booster up the hype around earnings, because even if the numbers aren't amazing, if they did all these cool, acquisitions and stuff like that, maybe these PRs get investors excited. So one could imagine maybe Palantir is working with the NHS to do the announcement on the day of their earnings, which means they definitely are working together and they know the deals got done. Or the Brits still have not decided. We will see, hopefully in a month, in a couple weeks, what the answer is. But it does seem like other news sources are catching on to why the NHS's FTP is so important. They're reporting it, they're talking about it, and now they're just trying to find out, did Palantir get the deal or not? All right, before we get to the last topic of the day, which is going to be Palantir in Israel, some comments from yesterday's YouTube video. I asked the question, what vertical do you think Palantir could get into that they haven't gotten into in terms of an industry? And we got some interesting comments. Mikey KM, it's a long comment, but he basically said the food industry, which Miller's Ale House, that's one of the restaurants we saw that Palantir is partnering with, and they're using AIP. So there's a ton of stuff they could use in terms of advertising, quality decisions, quality control, the amount of food waste, all of that could be good with Palantir. We got Gabriel 44110 that said recycling, covering collection for residential, commercial, industry, and recycling facilities. I think that's really important. We know that Palantir had shares of Rubicon, and they still own shares of Rubicon Technologies, ticker symbol RBT, which does digital waste management solutions. So there is some correlation between Palantir and recycling. Then we had Alan Crapo 2881 who said they could own fantasy football. Probably, because if they could figure out who wins the Super Bowl, then they could also make people a lot of money. And then we got one more comment from the end saying that Palantir could be awesome in the semiconductor industry. He said, I think a lot more people go into engineering, developing, and processing a chip than a lot more goes into that than what people think, from growing the crystal insights out of silicone, machining your own parts down appropriately, all the way to placing those custom parts in the machine that creates the wafers for a chip. For every machine that part is ran, that machine is having data collected from how the part was created to verify the caliber of the metrics. All of that stuff could be used by Palantir to make that data more efficient. And I agree. I mean, the semiconductor industry has massive amounts of data. Even if Palantir is not designing chips or creating chips, that's my bull case on Palantir. Their software could be everywhere because every company in the world has data, needs to learn how to manage that data, make sense of that data, and Palantir could be the operating system for all those companies to be able to do that. The question is if they execute, and hopefully we'll see in the future if they do that. All right, let's get to our main topic of the day, Palantir and Israel. So I'm going to be doing a lot more research in the future of seeing what the connection is, if there is any connection between Palantir and Israel. But it seems like there's definitely somewhat of a connection. So this is an article I'll put in the description from Ether Square. For those that don't know him in the Palantir community, this is the guy that finds every single company working with Palantir before they find Palantir. I would highly recommend subscribing to his Substack. Again, I'll put his link in the description. He had an article February 20th, 2023, about Palantir boosting their presence in Israel. And in this article, he basically talks about the fact that not only are they hiring more forward deployed engineers in Israel, obviously they have had an office in Israel for a long time, but he found this gem. In November 2022, Alex Karp did an interview with the FDE to talk about turning insights into action using the ontology and Foundry. And the engineer in that video, and we'll see a clip of it in a second, happens to be the former CTO, Chief Technology Officer for the Prime Minister's office in the government of Israel. That's interesting to me, that the guy working at Palantir for the past 7 years was the former CTO. He was not just some engineer, not just some, random dude helping out, get you coffee. He wasn't just the guy programming some stuff for the digital, for the software team to be able to market. He was the CTO for the entire Prime Minister's office of the government of Israel. I mean, That's incredible. His name is Aaron Witkin. If you go to his LinkedIn, this is who he is right here. He's a product manager at Palantir Technologies. The fact that he was a CTO for the government of Israel and he's a product manager at Palantir, I mean, that should say something in terms of just the quality of people that they hire. And he's been there for 7 years and he works in Tel Aviv. So this was the first connection around Palantir having some pretty high up people that worked in Israel now working for Palantir, and especially not just high up people working at different startups, but working for the government, where obviously there's going to be some correlation if you're working at the government of Israel and you're then working for Palantir's vertical in Israel. It doesn't mean the government is necessarily a client, but it does mean there is some correlation that could lead us to thinking that the government is a client. Let's listen to Alex and him talk for a little bit right here.
Given that you're on the cutting edge in your past life, and we would like to believe on the cutting edge in this life, and you've been here for how long?
6 years.
Okay, why? I mean, I'm sure my charming personality is one of the main reasons you've stayed.
Obviously.
But why are you here? Why are you planning, hopefully, to stay?
I hear Palantir talking about the mission, and a lot of that time it's in the context of fighting terrorism and all of that. But to me,
that right there is also very interesting, right? This is someone who, if you lived in Israel, you've been through terrorist attacks before, and that's another reason for why he's inspired to stay at Palantir.
Even in the commercial business and not just the government business, the fact that you kind of train people to take decisions based on truth is what helps us, build a better world that is not based on, fake news and demagogues and all of that. And to me,
And again, this person from Israel is kind of seeing the world become fake in front of him through all the propaganda that he sees. And so being in a business where the truth is required to have any type of action, to make any type of decisions, that's valuable to him.
really important just for my kids. I mean, it's not just internally, it's also externally. Like if you give an organization like the tools for them to, as we said, make the decisions on their business based on what's really happening in their business, and not by who's shouting louder or their view of the world and all of that, then they start to think like that, in the broader
one of
sense.
the things I really admire and actually love about the Palantir product is, in a lot of organizations, you have someone in the corner who's unpopular, who's doing all the work that creates alpha, and they do not get promoted. But if you're using a Palantir product, it's very clear who's creating the alpha. It's like, yes, this person actually is really valuable. And we've seen this across the government context, commercial context, and it's something that I find. And I run into people who are, were like, 25 when they first used our product, and now we're doing very important things. And I believe we've played a minor role in making sure they advanced.
Yeah, I remember the story about this aircraft engineer that always had this theory about what's wrong with one of the things in the airplane, but could never actually do this. I think I see him as this person in that corner. And with Palantir and Foundry, he was actually able to test his theory, prove that it's right, and actually fix the problem. I think that's what helps him.
Yeah, and of course we're very enamored with the fact that this problem got fixed and it launched a huge business in preventive maintenance across the globe in numerous heterogeneous industries. However, my version of it is also, and that person probably advanced in their career and would have probably been locked in some corner because they happen to be too quantitative and they don't quite know how to make everyone happy at the coffee shop, and therefore do not advance. And then the company doesn't advance.
It's really interesting seeing Karp talk about this because from one perspective, you've got Aaron basically saying, look, I like Palantir because it's a source of truth. It allows me to feel autonomous while I'm making decisions, while I'm helping different governments, while I'm helping different commercial clients. And that's why I like being here, because I feel like there's a mission that you guys actually care about. And that mission is permeated not through governments, which he worked for in the past in terms of Israel, but also in commercial companies to actually help them, like being able to come up with preventative maintenance solutions for airlines that end up becoming a massive industry for Palantir, now working with pretty much every airline across the world. And then Karp is saying, yeah, and that person that comes up with that solution at the airline using our software and creates a really meaningful thing that the organization, Southwest, United, Delta, whatever it is, could end up using, that person gets promoted because they use our software to figure out how to find insights to promote the organization. Therefore, they deserve to be promoted. And that's where Palantir kind of has a dual action in regards to helping people, but also helping entire organizations. So that's the first link, right? This product manager at Palantir is in Israel and was the former CTO of the Prime Minister's office at Israel. Now, the second link, which was really interesting as well, is here. The wide range of ways Palantir can benefit Israel is quite evident, and one of that comes down to defense purposes. The Iron Dome system that's used to take down missiles aimed at populated areas is known for its precision, reported at 90%, and its efficacy in saving lives without dramatically altering their citizens' daily activities. Israel likes to spend a big budget on R&D, with among the highest investments rates in the world, currently around 5 to 6% of their GDP. There's a lot of startups in Israel because they're a very sort of entrepreneurial, risk-taking type of company or country. So it's only natural to think that Foundry would be the ideal platform for Israeli companies, as Gotham is probably most a crucial necessity for its government and the military. For those that don't know what the Iron Dome is, it's a defense system that intercepts incoming rockets. It was developed by Rafael Advanced Defense Systems and Israeli Aerospace Industries in cooperation with Raytheon, and they were deployed in 2011. And now they are one of the core reasons, that Iron Dome system, for why Israel gets to protect its citizens, because it gets to basically intercept all the rockets coming from Hamas. One could argue that if you're trying to make sure those rockets don't land on your nation with efficacy and efficiency, you would need some level of software to be able to help you do that. And I don't know if that's the case, but two things. Either Palantir software is being used on the Iron Dome system or something like that to help them with targeting, to help them with maintenance, to help them with making sure that Iron Dome system stays afloat. Or now that Iron Dome system is really being put to use because they have to intercept a lot of rockets, and potentially a lot more if other countries get involved, they would be potentially calling on Palantir to be able to help them with that. So that is the extent of the research I'm starting to do. Obviously, we know Palantir has an office in Israel. They have publicly stated they stand with Israel. They believe in Western democratic values. They believe Israel is a democracy. They want to reaffirm that. But now the question becomes, hey, are you working with these guys? Are you helping them with targeting? Are we going to get a couple articles soon from the New York Times showing that Palantir is being actively used in Israel just like it was in Ukraine? Because if that happens again, that would just be incredibly interesting. I think the market would kind of appreciate it as a defense contract that's being used in a real-time situation. And if, that actually helps them stop terrorists, then I also think that would be very useful for Israel as well. So that is the extent of the links I have found in terms of Palantir and Israel's relationship. Again, I'll leave that Substack down in the description. You can check out Ether Square. But I'm sure there's a lot more links in the future that are going to come out to show if there is any connection between Palantir and Israel. All right, that's it for this episode of Daily Palantir. Question of the day for those to leave answers in the comments. What do you think Palantir is doing in Israel if there's a connection between Palantir and Israel? So let me know in the comments, what way do you think Palantir could be helping the Israeli government? I know there's targeting and, protection, defense, but are there any unique things you think they could be doing for the Israeli government at this specific time that maybe they haven't done in the past or that they were able to do with Ukraine? Any thoughts are appreciated for how you think Palantir is working with Israel below in the comments. Thank you guys for listening and watching. Let's see what happens to price action over the next couple days, because today was a rocky day, and I'll see you guys in the next one.